I've come to learn that it's okay if not everyone likes my reviews. Which one of you hit the dislike button? Hello interwebs and welcome to my review of the 4th episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, Moist Vessel. Oh god, I hate even just saying the title of this episode, Moist Vessel. Blech. I don't like it. I hate this episode. It's awful just for that reason. But seriously, I'm going to give you my actual thoughts on this episode. As always, I'm going to start off with my non-spoiler thoughts. So those of you who may not have seen the episode yet or don't have access to the episode, you can still watch my review. I'll give a heads up when I get into spoiler territory. Don't worry. I will say, having just finished the episode literally like 5-10 minutes ago and sort of coalescing my thoughts on this episode, I do have really kind of strange feelings on it because I think overall this might be my least favorite episode, but kind of mulling it over in my brain and thinking about it for the past 5-10 minutes as I set up this video review, I kind of am realizing the only reason I think it ranks lowest on my list of episodes of Lower Decks so far is the fact that for me, some of the jokes didn't land. All of the other episodes, I was laughing throughout the episode, and while there are a lot of jokes in the latter half of this episode that I really was laughing out loud at, some of the jokes towards the top half of the episode I kind of felt forced. I kind of saw them coming. But again, that's kind of a taste thing. So for me, the first half of this episode wasn't as funny as I've come to expect so far, so that lowered it a little bit in my estimation. But that being said, if I look at the actual plot and what's going on within the episode itself in terms of character growth and sort of Star Trekian kind of crazy science fiction plot, there's some actual really good, great, and excellent stuff in this episode. I kind of used 3 different adjectives there. I think there's some really wonderful character development in here. I think there's some wonderful deepening of some of the relationships between characters, specifically the captain and Mariner. And also, we kind of get a look at some characters that have been pushed to the side a little bit in previous episodes, namely Tendi. Tendi was a character that I was kind of worried that we weren't getting enough of her so far. After the premiere episode, we kind of hadn't seen much of her going into it so far. And even the premiere, she was just more of a sort of audience surrogate character, not really a character on her own. But here, Tendi actually gets a storyline of her own, and we actually kind of flesh her out as a character and give her some character quirks and flaws, actually. So in terms of good storytelling, in terms of all that stuff, character development, story stuff, cool science fiction stuff as well, there's a cool sort of sci-fi Star Trekian premise that I don't want to spoil for you. I actually think it works really, really solidly as an episode. And like I said, I think the only reason that this ranks lower than the other 3 that I've seen so far is quite literally, I didn't laugh as much during the first half of the episode. But even that kind of, that sort of bad taste in my mouth gets erased by the end of the episode because there were some jokes in here that I literally died at. I'll tell you in the spoiler section, but there were some jokes that just had me laughing out loud. So yes, I still think that this is my least favorite episode of Lower Decks so far, but as just an actual episode of a show that I like, it's still pretty solid. If this is the lowest of the low for Lower Decks so far, that's a very good sign because if we looked at other Star Trek shows at this point, like Next Generation had Code of Honor, Deep Space Nine had, Move Along Home. If this is as low as it gets, it's definitely not the depths of those shows. This is still a very, very, very solid episode that I highly enjoyed. All right, that's it for my spoiler-free thoughts. So if you haven't seen the episode, feel free to get off here or let the video run so I get the watch time because that always helps. But I totally understand if you have to head out right here because we're going to dive right into the spoiler section of this video. Okay, so for my spoiler thoughts, like I was saying before, the top half of this episode didn't really work for me as much. The cold open of this episode, which historically, as the past 3 episodes have been, the cold open has sort of been separate from the rest of the episode going on. This one still was kind of separate, but not as much so, with Mariner sort of handing out the pads and yawning during a meeting. I got the joke that it was going for, that we making fun of the Star Trekian over exposition sort of thing. There are so many episodes of Next Generation, really any Star Trek show, where the characters just sit around just spouting exposition in a meeting format, and there's not really much else going on than just exposition. So I got that she was yawning at how boring it was. I happen to be someone who likes exposition. Thank you very much. Kind of felt expected, and that was kind of a lot of the top of the episode humor for me, Tendi tripping over the sand and ruining the guy's ascension. I called that was going to happen before she even entered the ascension. That felt like a kind of a expected setup for an episode that she was going to sort of be set on this journey. So a lot of those jokes didn't really land all that hard for me, and it kind of made it a little bit rough watching for the first like 10 minutes or so of the episode. It wasn't bad by any means, but it wasn't as strong. And the things that I did really like in the opening, though, was I loved the sort of Star Trek setup of this generation ship that has this cool organic matter that terraforms inorganic matter. I think I said that right. I think that that was a really cool science fiction concept that feels very Star Trek-y, that they would be investigating these things. And I also like that we got to see a Tellarite captain here. I liked how that story, again, as is the case with Lower Decks so far, it was just sort of like the background of the episode until it kind of sprung into the main part of the action in the latter half of the episode. And even then, it wasn't really instigated by our characters. It was instigated by the complete other ship. So it still feels like even when this big sort of thing is happening, going on, it's not like our main characters, even the bridge crew of the Cerritos, that was part of the action. It's just sort of something that was happening around them, which really fits the Lower Decks feel. And that kind of structure can throw people a little bit, that the characters are a little less active in the main plot, but I really think it let us focus in on the actual character plots that were going on in this episode, and I think that they were very, very strong. I'll start with Tendi. As I said, Tendi is a character in the first few episodes of the show that I was a little worried was sort of getting brushed aside. So I'm glad that she, 4 episodes in, sort of got a character focus here. And while her setup, like I said, the fact that she ruined this guy's ascension, which, by the way, I find it funny that they use the term ascension in the same exact way that Stargate uses the term ascension. It's just kind of funny considering that's, exactly what it is. It is the term for it, but I just find the sort of connection between Stargate and Star Trek kind of fun. I'm sure someone will say, yeah, it's plagiarism, but Ascension is ascension, whatever. But yeah, other than her setup, and sort of the jokes around her sort of like trying to get this guy to like her and trying to help her, I didn't find the jokes around that all that funny, but I did like the character development that it gave her, that it wasn't the fact that she had ruined something for this guy that was bothering her. It was the fact that she needs to be liked, which is something I deeply, deeply feel on a deep level. Like, I get anxious when I feel like people don't like me. It causes me a lot of, day-to-day social anxiety when I kind of assume that people around me don't like me, and it causes me a lot of worry. I don't necessarily go as aggressive as Tendi does, but I understand that core feeling. And so I liked that her story, while not as funny as I could have hoped, would sort of bring this character development out of her. And I think that that's really strong character writing and sort of giving us kernels of who she is, considering that we really hadn't gotten much of her character so far. However, I really loved how the end of the episode wrapped up with, the guy trying to sacrifice his life for her, and then him ascending, and that was the scene that I was mentioning during my spoiler-free section that just had me dying. His ascension, I laughed out loud. With the moment where he says, I can see Abraham Lincoln, the referencing TOS, the TOS episode with Abraham Lincoln, I was literally like rolling on the ground at that. That was freaking perfect, way over the top, and just had me hysterically laughing at the sort of making fun of the trope of an ascension. I was thinking of like Daniel Jackson in Stargate there. Some of the jokes were expected, but I did get one really big laugh out of it, and I liked what it did for Tendi. I can speak good words. The other storyline that I really enjoyed, and I think the only other major storyline going on in this episode, was Mariner and the Captain storyline. Again, the first part of this episode I didn't really enjoy. It kind of felt a little bit rote, like I saw the jokes sort of coming along, like, yes, the captain's kind of full of herself, claims the advice of her subordinates, that sort of thing. I've seen those jokes before, but I really liked the making fun of Star Trek tropes as the episode went on. One of the scenes that really made me laugh, as Mariner, I liked seeing that Mariner just hates being, a senior bridge staff member. Dear God, maybe I can't talk. And it just frustrates her because she finds it so boring. And it sort of sets up these wonderful jokes making fun of the sort of more relaxed pace and friendliness of the Next Generation, like the poker game. I thought where everyone just folds and it's a friendly game. The fact that, in all Star Trek Next Generation, their poker games are all fairly friendly and like kind and teaching, and like Data would screw up and they would help him out and things like that. Making fun of that sort of like more low-key tone that Next Generation had, as opposed to the hyper tone that we get here on Lower Decks. And so that was a fun little meta bit going on. But as the episode progressed and we finally got into sort of the major plot of the episode, which was this really cool sort of, I will say the animation on the ship getting sort of terraformed by this like goo stuff from the Generation ship was really cool. Beautiful animation there. I mean, I like the animation of the show. It hasn't like overwhelmed me, but I think it's solid animation. But that was really, really beautiful stuff. You can really tell that the animators put some really good work into the animation here, and sort of, I loved the terraform nature of the ship, like them having to go into the like rock formations through the turbo lift shaft. That was very cool. But I liked that it sort of put Mariner and her mother, the captain, whose name I'm blanking on at the moment, it kind of put them head to head and kind of forced them to recognize that they have this inherent tension, and that maybe the captain isn't being as mature as she thinks she is, that she is full of herself, and that Mariner is just being her own person. And yes, maybe she's disrespectful, maybe she's not as mature either, but she gets a little bit of that from her mother. And I like the subtleness towards the end of the episode where they reconcile, and I liked that sort of nice moment of them reconciling. But then when the Admiral comes in and you get him, making fun of that trope of Admiral saying sense oars instead of sensors, it was a great little thing. But I like the subtle little hint that the captain also noticed it and was also subtly making fun of it. Mariner was saying it much more abrasively and yawning and sort of like letting him know in her sort of, over the top way. But the captain was doing it too. The captain was also making fun of his sense oars comment, just in a much more subtle way. And it highlights both the distinct personalities of each character, but that they do share, the same type of humor and a lot more under the surface than one would think. And again, I think that's just really brilliant character writing to show that these characters are distinctly different personalities. That's the cause of their tension, but also they have a lot more in common than one would think. And I thought that was just a really brilliant, subtle thing, but really something and it came out of like making fun of tropes of Star Trek, but also showed us character. That's just really wonderful writing, to be very honest with you. Like, just absolutely great. So the back half of this episode, I thought was absolutely fantastic. I also like the fact that we do get a little bit of Boimler here, that it wasn't anything, it wasn't a ton, it wasn't distracting from the episode, but there was a little bit of Boimler. Like, I just enjoyed the fact that he couldn't figure out how to be bad at breaking the rules, or, being good at breaking the rules. Like, he spills the coffee on Ransom, and Ransom just freaks out at him during the moment of crisis. Was hysterical, because that's the worst thing that Boimler could possibly come up with, is like accidentally dropping coffee on purpose. It was a nice little small touch. Didn't distract from the rest of the episode, but it was like a good sort of like running C plot going on with the episode. So that was a ton of fun. The other thing too, I will say, I like the look of the Generation ship. It had this sort of giant bee look, and I actually wondered if the sort of organic stuff was going to overtake that Generation ship and make the ship become like a living bee, which would have been kind of a cool idea. But it didn't go that way, which was fine. It's totally okay. But I was kind of expecting that sort of setup because the ship looked so organic to begin with. That I thought that was where it was going. But that's cool. They can do their own thing. One other thing I will mention, I loved the computer saying hitting it when the captain said hit it and the computer said hitting it, which is a nice little subtle reference to Captain Pike over on Discovery, and a nice little call out to the computer. Just saying hitting it was just a good joke. But that's pretty much my entire thoughts on this episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. What did you think of Moist Vessel? Still don't like that title. Blech. But yeah, what did you think of this episode of Star Trek Lower Decks? I'd love to hear all your comments down in the comment section below. My brain is off today for some reason. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more reviews of Star Trek Lower Decks, every single Star Trek show going forward, and a bunch of other stuff that I do on this channel. Also, you can support me on Patreon if you want to. Also, I have 2 podcasts as well. One is Star Trek Behind the Lines, which is a comedy Star Trek RPG podcast. The other one is What the Frel, where I do rewatches of Farscape with the one, the only Council of Geeks, who is another LGBTQ geek YouTuber like myself. But other than all of that stuff, beyond, subscribing, commenting, Patreon, the podcast, all the way too many things that I do, I just hope that you, as always, sarcastically, live long and prosper. Thank you so much to all of my patrons, and a special thank you to Piston Twisted Garage, Ashley Allen Bokikio, Miranda Janelle, Eli Bergmas, Ashlyn Solstice, Christina Dalliance, Greg Gillum, Munir Amlani, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl, Wayne Twitchell, Alexander Miller, Ish the Mad, Buttoneer, Randy Thompson, Mouse Pounder, Jemshin, Susan Banks, Wellington Marcus, Lorena Mesa, Mari Neckar, John Stell, Gavin Robinson, Michael Beam, William Stewart, Jason Knott, Maeve, Stephen Clinard, Zach Cody, Subraxis, Wen Dizzle Bizzle, Dante St. James, Gretchen Badger, Polly Mina, Din Hagney, and Bree Beecher. Thank you so much to all of you. I could not do this without you, and I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper.